with that, I think we'll pivot on to the big game of the weekend. Welsh fans far and wide, the grins still firmly on faces, I dare say, and thoroughly deserved. I actually thought it was a bit of a scrappy do encounter. It reminded me a huge amount of the just from England's perspective. It reminded me a huge amount of the World Cup 2015 game. Yeah, just in the sense that they were beating them physically. They weren't like it was close, but England were having the edge on it. Yeah, they had made the play, they had got the try, and they were just getting an edge on the game and putting it to the squeeze. But they never quite identified that they needed to kill it. Yeah. And they were just going through the motions, being in the lead and being quite comfortable being in the lead and happy to sort of see the game out this way. But Wales were always just there, a score away. Yeah. And then, of course, Gareth Davis rushed in with that try and England desperately tried to get it back and chipped that kick into the corner and lost it. And ended up costing them, getting out of their pool in their own World Cup. That's like quite a harrowing memory, surely. Some of those boys were involved, I'm sure. Farrell was. Yeah. And it strikes me as somewhat bizarre that, and it goes back to our old critique of England. There's a lot good about this England team, but there's no, like, as a team, they just culturally they just don't do introspection, and that's the thing. Like that's like when Ireland lose a game. And that's not to say that we don't sometimes repeat mistakes, because we do. But it's etched into the minds and the hearts of the public. Like, it's worn. It's a scar that everybody wears, like a bad loss. The England game this year will be no different. But there's others, that game against Georgia in 2007 in the World Cup that we actually did win. But that's a scar that every Irish fan walks around with. Yeah. And a good few others. But the little errors in memory and memories of what mistakes were made. And constantly, even you go into media circles around Ireland, they're constantly thinking about, are we repeating the same mistakes that we made in this failure or this failure? We have so many failures to pick from. Yes, indeed. But like what strikes me as so weird is to see England basically, in a daze make the same mistake that they made in what was the most embarrassing, episode in their modern rugby history, and
their most recent defeat against that team as well. The last time
Wales beat them, and it was a very similar game, and they got into a very similar mindset, I guess, where they just thought they were comfortable when they really weren't, and they had a very dangerous Wales nipping at their heels. Yeah, and it just didn't occur to it. Seemingly they got shocked by Wales' second wind.
Partly, they also gifted them. It was strange. Farrell's, in terms of introspection, like I watched the post-match thing, and Farrell's main take on it was that they lost momentum and couldn't get it back, which is partly true, but
you also didn't do enough when you had it. That's the key. That's huge. They got that one try, but for me, and this is Welsh fans are we're going to talk about how great Wales are in just a moment, but for me, when they had the foot on the throat, they had the advantage in the game. They never really went to press at home. It was always just tactical kicking, pin them back, win the collisions. When Wales had the ball, England didn't really allow them to do much with it for much of the game. Wales were very narrow, and they weren't getting much purchase basically for the entire time Anscombe was on the field, and but they were never. You never felt that they had the urgency to kill the game. Yeah, and England were picturing just a nice one-score win and on we go, but Wales had other ideas, and it was.
Well, there's such an inherent danger in playing that way as well, which should be exposed in World Cups anyway, because you can't afford to be that conservative in mindset. But they certainly for large parts of the first half, as I was thinking, it was just they were smashing into each other. They were both too narrow. Yeah. Wales had a few little plays where they went wide straight away, got some purchase, but then it took them 4 or 5 looks to get from that side to the other side of the pitch, even though the space was all out wide. And so there were wasteful possessions in the first half, aplenty. And they do have these teams these two particular teams really do like the idea of trying to run over one another for large parts of the game. But England they were slightly inaccurate. Wales were, what they did very well was what I asked them to do, which was slow down England's ruck ball. And sure enough, Youngs and Farrell didn't look anywhere near as assured without that massively fast tempo platform that was coming from the first two games, where they were just so utterly dominant against admittedly, and off the pace in terms of physicality, they were well off in Ireland in week 1, and then France were just completely rudderless as far as selection and pace. So they were kind of, despite it being 2 very solid wins and 5 points collected in each, it wasn't truly telling because they weren't slowed down yet.
Yeah.
And it was like, of course, a team's going to create that picture for them. How are they going to deal with it? It's not just going to be plain sailing, which is always where England go when they get 1 or 2 good wins. Is like we must be in the picture for the best team in the world now. Come on, guys, we won 2 games in a row. We are aren't we? We're favourites for the World Cup, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, no, guys, like vast improvement, definitely, and like some of the personnel changes, the centre pairings they've landed with. Vast improvement.
100%.
The fact that Curry is playing so well with Underhill to come back means that the 7 jersey is now going to be a 7. Whichever one of those gets the pick,
100%.
That's a vast improvement as well. Their back row looks more solid and balanced for it. But there are still some real problems, and one of them is a key one that keeps recurring for England is discipline. And it's like all the chat from Eddie Jones leads me to believe that it won't get fixed, because like his take on it was going like, yeah, we got the rough end of the stick with which is to be expected when you come away from home on the penalty count. And it's like, no, you did that. Yeah. Your players did that, and one key man in that is someone who you've been flagging this for the last year pretty much, is Kyle Sinclair. Yeah. As much as he made a load of tackles and is a great athlete, he's a head case and a liability, particularly after an hour-long shift when his head gone.
Very gifted, but he is like the recurring theme from him over the November internationals was him, talking some ridiculous smack,
which happened again,
and then instantly making an error where he dropped a ball. We actually didn't drop any balls today immediately after talking smack, which is like
him and Alan Wynne-Jones were squaring off, and Alan Wynne was like, it was so obvious who was on tilt in that exchange. Alan Wynne is always in the middle of those fracas, and yet never at fault somehow, and never perceived as such by the refs. It's an amazing gift he has to always be there when it's kicking off, and to never be perceived as the bad guy, and seemingly always say the right thing to the ref, which he does with remarkable consistency. But him and Sinclair, it was like an obvious thing between him and Gatland as well, and to try and throw that boy on tilt, and it worked.
As soon as he tilts, he just loses the plot, and like you say, sometimes it manifests itself as a drop ball, and the week it manifested itself as, I think, 3 really bad,
including 2 consecutive ones that were easy exit, or kind of like exit / attacking set now for Wales, because it was doing what all England Wales games do, especially in the second half when it's tight, is like going cross between 10-metre lines, and Sinclair just needless penalty gifts Wales attacking platform after a few phases. Another needless silly penalty from Sinclair, 3 points. And they're back there. That was when in the period when they were just chipping away, and England were allowing them to do so, and actually just welcomed a few other things, like Farrell then kicking out on the full shortly thereafter was just a sign of things like slipping out of control for England, because as Farrell does, kind of the team do as well, because he is very, very much the spine of it. But it was like all of that came from, and Sinclair was taken off then in pretty much in direct response to that, as well as being, I think, over the hour mark for prop is obviously like time to replace him anyway. But he's just as good as the performance had been before. Then it's almost moot. It's because of how bad those plays were and how catastrophic in terms of playing Wales back in.
Right now, his presence in the team is a problem, in the sense that it has now cost them. I think one could argue cost them the game, and with it perhaps the Grand Slam. And right now that's going to keep happening. Whether or not that can be fixed, there's no way of knowing when you don't know the guy and you don't know the context of the camp and everything else. But like if it is being addressed, the addressing of it isn't working, and if it's not being addressed, it needs to be, because his mindset and his temper is affecting his game. His game, which generally speaking is very good, but there's just something's not right there, and it's killing them, and it has killed them.
This was one game that it got away from them, and I do cite those 2 consecutive penalties back to back as being pretty seminal in terms of Wales's recovery and England's slipping away from that, and they just kind of slipped out of that game then for large periods, and then Wales with things like Dan Biggar coming on and just managing to spark everything into life.
I think there's one note, like, because I think generally speaking, like, there's the discipline is the one thing that you'd isolate. The other thing that was sort of revealed just in terms of how they're defending. I mean, Curry has license to go for 1 or 2 and he's on, but there's no, like, their defensive line is very much fan out, push up, and like Wales went for the variation of a couple of pick and jams, trying to get through the soft centre of that narrow blitz. The other option, of course, is to sort of flash it wide, which I think if they'd committed more to, they might have got a bit more purchase in that first half. But like with that defence, you're actually limiting yourself to quite few turnovers. I mean, you're basically backing your defence to win collisions enough.
That's always been the way the Eddie Joneses in England have gone about things.
And that's the thing. But then Wales,
it's only a recent innovation to add a 7 to the mix.
And then Wales went and scored a 40 odd phase, I think 34 phase try against them, and that's the other side of the fence. You're 60 minutes into a game and you're relying on just your barnstorming physicality. You don't have that turnover game to lean on, and that's nothing against Tom Curry, who actually is good at that game. It's to do with the setup. And it facilitated Wales being slow and methodical, and then when they got the chance, taking it. And then the other note that I would still make about where England are at is I think that, and you and I think disagree on this somewhat, but I think that the 15 jersey Elliot Daly's playing there at the moment. I think it's sort of an empty jersey, and I think as the games go on, like, Farrell's going to need a little bit of help in the distribution game. What they have now is what's getting more settled and what looks a very, very, very solid centre partnership. A lot of optimism, and for all of the issues they had at 12 last year, Wales did attack that channel quite a bit and didn't get any purchase through Tuilagi and Slade. So defensively, offensively, looking good. That's not something that can be changed. The right wing, they vary up a bit, but the left wing is Johnny May, and it's the 15 jersey which is currently occupied by Elliot Daly.
Formerly Mike Brown.
Still
should be Alex Good.
I mean, that's what I think, but that's the obvious answer. But I think I would settle at the moment for just considering that, like, I don't know if Elliot Daly is nailed on in that jersey. His coverage for a couple of the kicks wasn't great. I'm not sure if he was the guy who was under the Josh Adams.
He was the guy, but he was also very narrow. That, like, he was coming at it from, as Bod would highlight in coverage, he was at a very negative angle, whereas it was the Welsh winger who was attacking it, and he was kind of 100%, flailing. But he doesn't have the big plays in him, I don't think. And what he does have is a good kicking game and a good little distribution game at times. But I actually think that Slade brings a lot of what he brings anyway, in terms of the skill set. And I just think that that's a jersey. If you're looking to add a new dynamic into what they do with the back line, that's the jersey. Fullback.
There's an interesting shout.
On the wing.
It's an interesting shout. You need help in the backfield. They need to get that pendulum going.
Definitely.
Good. But, it's just a thought, is all it is, just a nugget.
A little one. But, it's less of a vital problem as the penalties, because as soon as they could cut some of them out, they could have even won that game. Despite how it was going and how Wales have shown themselves to be one of the top second half teams in the world as well. I think in terms of they manage their fitness and they can strike in many different ways, and they always recognise it in the second half, which is very, very good to see. So I suppose we should talk more about Wales now, because England lost that game and lost their bonus point as well. Great fun.
Jeez, it was that last 20 was as last 20 was as compelling as a little sequence of rugby as I've seen in quite a while. It was the context of it, the atmosphere. It was incredible. I think I'd like to meet the man who didn't jump up out of his seat when Josh Adams took that ball. It was incredible.
And what a take.
I really respect the hustle of this Welsh team, but they have the one of the things that's just that it's just been instilled in them over time is just a irreconcilable self-belief. They're not going to be deterred, and no matter how a game goes, there's almost a jouet aspect to what they're doing. They're very much sticking to. No, it's not like harried into them, process driven. They have their processes, but they have boys who make plays all over the pitch, so they stay in games, they believe in one another, and then sooner or later somebody can make a game-breaking play, and they back themselves to do it, and more often than not these days they are doing it. I really respect the hustle. They take games to very different places. They have many different styles of playing games,
many different ways of scoring tries, which is something that we complement in a team. You want to have different pictures to your tries, and Wales have myriad different ones. And sure, they were showing a pick and jam game that obviously caught England a bit unawares because they weren't expecting a Welsh team to be going for that line of attack, but they cited that as a way to get at England, and it worked in the second half. We were questioning it in the first. We really felt they were too narrow, and that was where England were getting the better of them in that first 40. but just they stuck at it and managed to change it up enough in the second half to just get those tries and get that win, as well as clawing their way back in, staying in it. And really, one of the things that I really like about them is just how effective all of the men are at slowing their defensive breakdown down, or slowing the offensive breakdown of the other team down.
Yeah, their defensive breakdown is very good at slowing the ball down.
Yeah, and it's little things like Alan Wynne-Jones is great at it, like just either holding his feet and then falling slightly on the wrong side, and then managing to manufacture a situation where he's somehow pinned despite having orchestrated the fall. And it's all just very Richie McCaw levels of mouse. But it's not just him, it's like anyone who goes in, the tackler is always slightly slow. Like he at minimum adds 2 seconds to the ruck. The Welsh tackler minimum adds 2 seconds to their ruck, and more often than not it's closer to 5, and it just makes their defence so much more effective. And Edwards Blitz is still very physical. They're still quite a big team, which is something that Gatland has kind of favoured for years, but there are fewer kind of gaps, like Cuthbert being on one wing. Like I would have backed Cuthbert to not make that play that Adams made at the very end. As
bad as I think Gatland got it for those years when the back line was, Phillips, Bigger, Roberts, Davis, North, Cuthbert, Halfpenny. That was that kind of Warren Ball era. That was the back line that sort of typified the ugly style
very
of play.
Bludgeoning kind of, not very Welsh expansive
which
kind of
was
style.
Good enough to win Six Nations that were played to a poor standard, and not good enough to ever beat a Southern Hemisphere team ever. But what you have to say, like, we did a video when we started this channel, it was sort of titled, I think the title of it was why Warren Gatland isn't the right choice for the Lions tour, which we believed at the time. And one can debate whether or not he got that right or wrong, but ultimately it was a tied series, and he did end up varying it and getting Sexton and Farrell in there, which was the right call ultimately. And I'd come to really, really respect the guy's hustle as a coach, and I think he is an elite coach. He does, the way he has this team set up, they're reaping the benefits right now of when you get an elite coach and you put faith in him to the nth degree.
Because now he's
12 years in charge. So that team that he's coached now has seen every picture. So they're, like you say, that they fall on the wrong side and they play fast and loose sometimes with the offside games. They only conceded 3 penalties in a game that was massively important, with like a load of niggle in it, with a load of with everything at stake. And they only conceded 3 penalties because they have muscle memory. They know what they can get away with and what they can't get away with. It's like your point on Danny Cipriani. He's become a much more mature player in the sense that he's seen the pictures that can go wrong. He knows a lot more about when he tries this, what's more likely to happen in these big games against these big teams. And Wales have seen it all over the last 12 years. And
but the fundamentals that are built in, things like that defence, has remained pretty consistent, and though the personnel are rotating, the system remains. And that's where it's like, considering things in World Cup cycles is something that most teams do, but Wales are really kind of beyond that, because they're in more of a decade plus cycle of building a team. So it's great maturity. It's the best ever winning streak of any Welsh team as of the weekend, which is excellent. That's fair play to them, but richly deserved. They had a fantastic year last year, despite being outmatched, it felt, in Dublin. They proved themselves more clinical than the Irish, because they were getting dominated on possession, were still nicking tries and staying in the game, and were in it right to the very last play. And that was the last loss that they've had in the test, in a test jersey. That's an amazing run, And
they're just solid enough at all areas and adaptable enough that they can like, when they play a team like Ireland. Or a team with a really strong scrum, like, they haven't got the best scrum in the Six Nations, but they can hold the scrum up if they have to. They can do a decent line out maul if they have to, and they can defend it, if they have to, or they can pick off a couple of line outs, but it's not their area of expertise. But they'll defend the legs off you. Like, their defense attack, they can attack in many different areas, many different ways. It's hard to identify, what's their strongest area of attack. You see them doing offloads in the tight sometimes.
You see Williams off kick return being very effective.
And that's the thing. It's versatility. They can go in all kinds of different ways, and then they come into each game with a plan, and everybody buys into the plan, and they attack. They attack in certain ways where they think the team are weak. They front up in certain areas where their opposition think that they have an advantage, and they're rarely outsmarted. And like this, I can't speak highly enough. Like they were in a clunky position in that game where they were actually attacking too narrow. They were not like they actually, for all of it, their defence had stopped England's go forward, which was great, but they hadn't been able to generate much go forward of their own. And it was looking like one of those games, except England had made the game breaking play and got the try, and they just clung on in again. They got the little break from Kyle Sinclair, chipped a couple of points on the board, and then that sequence, which is not, it's just another string to their bow, because it was a very Irish try that they ended up scoring. It was very narrow, it was very slow, they went for a lot of phases, but England resourced their width really well. So they don't compete at the breakdown. So it was just an obvious thing. We just kept going, kept it slow, and eventually they got sucked in. And the guy who we've touched on but haven't given enough credit to yet, Dan Biggar, who came onto the field like a man possessed and really does have when he's on song.
He's a big game man. We've known this about him for years. He turns up, he plays his best games in Ospreys colours when it's like quarter-final, semi-final, final time. And similarly for Wales, in the World Cup he was making serious plays as well. And even though Wales in the last World Cup we felt were a little stagnant in some of their attack, which was unlike them, and apart from a few little moments of brilliant that felt more like heads up play, they managed to think their way around England very well. But it was against Australia they were very disappointing, wasn't it?
Yeah, and they tamely out against South Africa.
But in that South Africa game, Dan Biggar did produce a moment similar to a moment in the game where a chip and chase that he gathered is all of his own that's led to an attacking set that I do think they got a try from in that instance. But it's like he is some man for just
that pass quick with the rush on him off the left out to George North, which was the game breaking pass of that set, and then the good line from Corey Hill to finish it off. But that was beautiful.
And it was Dan Biggar at the base of that. It was an assist for Dan as well, because he was playing scrummy at the ensuing ruck.
I mean, like, we'll get into Ireland obviously in due course and talk about one of the areas that really we lament is just the fact that they don't have guys in the back line who make plays when the game stagnates. Outside of maybe Stockdale, but Wales are just full of them. Jonathan, like, if the game is stagnant and then at a moment, Liam Williams will produce something, or Jonathan Davis will produce something,
or George
North, and then Josh Adams on the right wing with that just tackerful, masterful,
great take,
crowd raising, ear thumping, heart beating
from England.
Beautiful take for a try. It was it was really magic, and in terms they have a lot of qualities to them. They really do. I don't know if they're the best team in the world, but I think they're probably the most versatile. They're one of the toughest to beat. And they're purring along very nicely. It's true. It's gonna make, like, they're obviously like teams. Ireland were in a place where they were very confident, and they looked unbeatable, and then you got a taste when they were beaten you're getting a taste right now of just how brittle perhaps some of that confidence can be, especially when it's in a team that doesn't traditionally dominate. But right now they look like they have a lot of strings to their bow, and they have other things. They have a very solid base to fall back on, and then a lot of different places they can move the game. So it's
definitely it's all positive. They're certainly contenders for this World Cup. And getting right up there. There's an argument for having them creep up the rankings towards second as well. I'm sure
they're
like they're
themselves
dangerous.
In the Springboks, all optimism right now, I would say.
For both of them, compared to a slightly stuttering 1 and 2 in New Zealand and Ireland, who are like struggling with the pace of all that and that target on their back somewhat and just questioning. Whereas Wales have just been on the up and up, and having bled so many players, having so many, like, just so many who've had game time there, who know how to come in and work the system, so much so that you can afford to leave Dan Biggar on the bench now, which is something that they never could before in years gone by. But now it just means you can change games in those instances when, like, Anscombe did very well for 60 minutes despite not probably getting the better of it and managing to work his way around that England defence. So you can bring Biggar on, like, amazing. Like, that's what you want.
And Reece Patchell in the wings,
Patchell waiting there. He was back playing for Scarlets, I think. So back on the pitch anyway, but another fine option. And we were kind of wondering who's going to nail down this 10 jersey, but then maybe it doesn't matter if they can take games to such different places that you can just rotate them.
That's huge. Like, that's huge. That's a whole other world. Like, I remember people talking about when player gets dropped from the team, it's always the sense of like, oh, I'd be disappointed in him. But yeah, I like the idea of having guys in who are just different tools for different tasks.
Yeah.
And Wales definitely have the luxury to play with that idea a bit going forward. That said, huge 2 weeks coming up for them. They're on course for a Grandslam. They got to go to Murrayfield. They got to play Ireland. It's still a very, very daunting task, and this is a great competition in terms of just showing up your weak moments. I mean, you're going to be tested in a lot of different areas.
For sure.
Murrayfield, like with Finn Russell back, for all of Scotland's woes, if they do what they can do and get it right, it's a tough game. It's a tough game for any team.
Yeah.
So they're going to have to be on song for that, and then we know what Ireland can bring is that physical dominance and control that can come from the halfbacks.
Always a tough game, generally a one score game when Ireland face Wales either way. So they won't be underestimating the Irish at all.
No.
Like, it's whether they can go to Murrayfield and just kind of kick on, not falter, not run into a Scotland resurgent all of a sudden. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah.
But like, you never know in this competition who's gonna get it, and that's why it did blow it open, because England not only did not get the win but not the bonus points. So now they're back on 10 points. I think Wales on 12, despite 3 wins from 3.
I think no matter what, if Wales lose a game, England are going to get... Because Wales didn't max out against Italy. They're probably not going to max out against Ireland, where England did. England obviously maxed out against France, where Wales didn't. England are winning the bonus point battle with anybody, I would say.
Yes.
So, like, the picture for Ireland to win is probably England to lose to Scotland and Ireland to beat Wales, and then the picture for Wales to win is just to win a Grand Slam. I think it's Grand Slam or zip for the Welsh, which makes the equation all that simpler.
Yeah, and it's it makes for an exciting last 2 weeks, which is great. And tremendous game. I would say probably the match of the tournament so far. Was that Wales England game, and because it was decided by tries, class moments. Had it been decided by an error, as we had feared it might, and it looked like it could be, it was that kind of game. But the fact that it was big game-breaking plays that made it, as very much we're of the opinion that it's like, if the try comes, if it's a try that wins the game in that kind of context, that's what makes it great.
But you know what?
But if it goes to an error, you can't say it's great, because it's not.
All of those Wales-England games that were decided by those errors, you think of that loose kick.
Jonathan Davis, I think.
That
from the end zone. That ended up being
caught. But that was a Gatland team as well, with a lot of the same players, and it's that muscle memory and that ability that England seem to lack, but Wales definitely have, to just learn from those mistakes and to do things better, and to acknowledge and understand that they were in that situation where this game was taking a very similar shape to previous games, and England were probably going to eke it out, and then to change it up and make the game-breaking moments and take chances when they come, and just have that 34 phase set in them that wasn't in them before. They're adding layers.
That's progress.
It's all good. It's all good.
Sure. Well done, Wales. Victory is sweet.
100%.
Thank you very much for watching that video. If you're new here, please like and subscribe down below, and leave a comment as well, because we enjoy the chat and conversation. Thank you.